Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday morning, January 16th. Quite an active weather pattern across the nation. We have three separate systems to deal with. One impacting California, another in the middle of the nation, and a western Atlantic low that is throwing some snow into the eastern part of New England. There's some ice mixed in as well up across Maine. We talked about last week the possibility of this particular Atlantic low developing an eye-like feature, and indeed it has this morning. Right here we can see latest imagery loop from the College of DuPage weather website. Right here you can see kind of an eye-like feature with the surface low pressure system of over the western Atlantic Ocean bands precipitation rotating into the eastern part of New England. There's some snow. Parts of Connecticut, Rhode Island, certainly the eastern half of Massachusetts this morning, including Boston and up across New Hampshire and Maine. Certainly some ice mixed in as well, and this will continue to be the case over the next several hours. Bands of precipitation rotating in from the east to the west and impacting eastern New England. Again, here is the center, and there is indeed an eye-like feature with this powerful western Atlantic low. Meanwhile, one of the systems that impacted California late last week into the past weekend is now pushed into the center part of the nation. It looks pretty impressive right now, throwing some rain on its warm side and snow on its colder northwest side. It will weaken as it reaches the eastern third of the nation on Tuesday. Meanwhile, California getting hit yet again with another storm system. Talked about a change in the large-scale weather pattern, bringing about relief to California. Indeed, there will be one more storm in the series of storms. It looks like it'll impact California in the middle of the week, Wednesday, Thursday time frame, and then past that becomes a much different weather pattern with drier conditions, not only for California, but for Washington and Oregon as well. Well, let's take a look at the latest radar loop across the nation. This is from WSI's Intellicast.com. First of all, New England, again, getting hit by this western Atlantic low that has developed that eye-like feature. Snow falling in Boston all the way down to Connecticut and Rhode Island and up across New Hampshire and Maine. Some ice is mixed in, sleet, freezing rain up across eastern part of Maine, and they will experience some rotating bands of precipitation moving from east to west over the next several hours, and certainly some accumulations will happen throughout the eastern part of New England. Meanwhile, the middle of the nation, California storm system has moved all the way into the central part of the nation. Rain on the warm sector, the warm side, and the east and southeast, and snow in the colder northwest side. Meanwhile, out across California and into the interior western U.S. from Arizona up across Utah and Nevada, there's some precipitation again this morning. Some heavy rain in the low-lying areas of California and heavy snow in those higher elevations of the Sierra Nevada, and some heavy snow, accumulating snow extending all the way into the Rocky Mountain states. Well, let's take a look at last night's ensemble run of the European model. This is the 0Z ensemble run. We're looking at 500 millibar height anomaly forecast maps across North America, and we'll detect this pattern change coming up. We talked about around January 20th. Indeed, that looks to be around the time this pattern changes dramatically out across the western part of Canada, the western part of the U.S. We begin the day here on Monday, January 16th, yet another low pressure area slamming into California. They had storm over the weekend, and this is another storm, and again there'll be one final storm, it looks like, in this series of storms the middle of this week, all represented here by the blues on this particular type of map. Deep upper level low situated over California. Another wave that we saw on the radar and the satellite right in the middle of the country, and here's that low associated with that western Atlantic surface low pressure area that's throwing some snow and some ice back into eastern New England this morning. Now let's move forward here, again using the ensemble run of the European model from last night, and here we have perhaps the last in the series of storms sliding in by the middle part of this week, impacting all the way down to California. And here we have, just to the west of there, south of Alaska, a ridge starting to pop up. And here we go now into the day on a Thursday, January 19th. And then by the time we get to the end of the work week here, January 20th, we see this ridge starting to intensify over the eastern Pacific, the west coast of the U.S., into Canada, western part of Canada as well. And we'll continue to move forward here. And indeed, there's quite a significant change here by the time we get to the end of the upcoming weekend. This is late Sunday now, January 23rd. Look at this ridge popping up over the eastern Pacific, bringing about relief to California, to Oregon and Washington, and warmer, drier conditions across western Canada, all the way up into Alaska. Meanwhile, downstream from that developing ridge will be upper level trough kind of spreading out across the nation, from first in the central U.S. and then spreading into the eastern part of the nation. Then we move forward here into next week. Now we're talking about a week from now, next Monday, January 23rd or so. The key players will be this ridge across the eastern Pacific all the way up into Alaska, upper level trough over the central part of the U.S., and a ridge over the southeastern parts of the nation, by a week from now, the early part of next week. We'll go out a little bit farther in time, and by the middle part of next week, still similar kind of a pattern with upper level ridging out across Alaska, western Canada. And we've talked about this before, and how this kind of a setup will allow for the transport of some cold air masses in this flow, this upper level flow from way up there, northwestern Canada, into the central part of the U.S. Certainly looks like a cold wave setting up here for the central part of the U.S., and some of that will spill to the east in this setup later on next week into the latter part of the month of January. Now let's go out a little bit farther in time, and again we have these key players here ridging over the southeastern U.S., western Atlantic, this upper level trough, again kind of spilling over into the eastern part of the nation. This is now the latter part of next week, still ridging up across Alaska and the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean. Go out a little bit farther in time, and here we have that setup by the latter part of next week. Key players ridging out across Alaska, pretty deep upper level trough setting up over the central U.S., spilling out over into the eastern U.S. and ridging over the western Atlantic. And this will also be quite an active weather pattern. When you see a setup like this, you kind of have kind of a battle zone right here. Looks like it'll set up later this week and into the week next week, with this ridging out over the western part of the Atlantic Ocean, upper level trough. You can imagine here will be kind of a battle zone and a kind of a conduit for some storms to move from the western U.S. into this particular zone here, let's say next week or so, from really from this weekend on through next week. So an active weather pattern setting up again with the three key players here in the upper air ridging out here, upper level trough out across the middle of the nation, and this ridging out across southwestern Atlantic into the southeastern part of the U.S. Well, how does the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast sequence here translate to temperatures? Looking at the 850 millibar temperature anomalies now, beginning today, Monday, January 16th, using the 0Z run of the Ensemble version of the European model here. Let's move forward here. And again, we have warmer than normal conditions aloft over New England right now, but there's certainly some snow falling throughout much of eastern New England from that western Atlantic low. Another area of low pressure impacting California today. We move forward into the middle of the week. There'll be yet another storm system impacting Washington, Oregon, and California, let's say Wednesday, Thursday time frame. Keep moving forward here. We'll see what happens with that developing ridge, and this is the time frame where it starts to develop, extending all the way up to Alaska, western Canada, western part of the U.S., and we'll start to see that upper level trough that develops over the center part of the nation start to impact temperatures here about a week from now. Now we're looking at the early part of next week, and notice this colder than normal air mass spreading from near the west coast all the way into the central part of the nation a week from now, early part of next week, and that ultimately works its way into the eastern part of the nation. Here we go now by the middle and latter part of next week. And this is quite a cold looking pattern for much of the nation by the latter part of next week. We're talking maybe a week and a half away now. The first area that will experience this chill down, this colder air mass, will be the central part of the U.S. Really looks like, once again, from the Dakotas spreading all the way southward to Texas, and then kind of spilling out over into the east later part of next week. We'll go out a little bit farther in time here, and boy, by the time we get a week and a half out to the latter part of January, the Ensemble version of the European as well as the Canadian model show similar pattern here with below normal temperatures, a widespread area below normal temperatures, extending all the way from the western part of the U.S. into the northeastern part of the nation. Again, we're talking week and a half away. This happens to be the forecast map for Saturday, January 28th. Well, let's wrap up with the European model run, the operational version from 0Z last night. By the way, all of these maps available from tropicaltidbits.com. We start off the day here on Monday morning, January 16th. Again, precipitation impacting much of the eastern half of New England with accumulating snow all the way from Rhode Island across eastern Massachusetts, parts of New Hampshire, Maine, and again, there will be some ice mixed in. Right here we see 986 millibar low, and that is the one that has that eye-like feature. Another low right in the middle part of the nation, rain on the warm side, southeast, snow on the northwest side, and California getting hit again by another Pacific Ocean storm. And this one is impacting Arizona, Utah, and Nevada, maybe more so since some of those recent storms here. So accumulating snow not only in the higher elevations of California, but the interior western U.S. as well. Now let's continue to move forward here into the day on Tuesday. And this strong storm system that currently exists over the central U.S. really weakens by the time it moves into the eastern third of the nation. There certainly will be some showers tomorrow in D.C., but just a bit of rain in Philadelphia, New York City, as this thing really weakens. The main part of that low drives up to the north and east, so not much in the eastern states on Tuesday. Meanwhile, we'll look upstream here and we see another one, perhaps last in the series of storms, sliding south and east, and looks like it'll impact California by the time we get to the middle of the week, Wednesday, Thursday time frame. Meanwhile, today's storm will slide in the middle part of the nation by the time we get to the middle of this week. And here we go again with one more storm system before that large-scale pattern change takes effect, with drier weather in California, Washington, Oregon from Thursday on. And this system will maintain its strength as it moves into the eastern U.S. by the time we get to Thursday. Expect a pretty healthy rainfall on Thursday, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and extending up into the northeastern part of the nation. Meanwhile, look at this. By the time we get to late Thursday, dry in California. Again, that's reflective of this large-scale pattern change. They look like they'll stay dry on Saturday and Sunday as well. Meanwhile, that storm system slides on through into the western Atlantic Ocean by the time we get to the end of the work week. And here we are by Saturday morning, and still dry now over California by the upcoming weekend. And we'll be watching moisture gathering together over the southern part of the U.S. this week, and it could make a run to the north and east by the early part of next week. Again, it looks like an active weather pattern will continue, not necessarily for California once we get by this midweek storm, but for the central and eastern U.S. as that upper level trough starts to kind of set up over the central U.S. and then spread out slowly to the east. It will be an active weather pattern between that trough in the middle of the nation and ridge over the western Atlantic, southeast U.S. It'll be kind of a pathway for low pressures to ride up and over from the southwest to the northeast. So a lot going on for the last couple of weeks of the month of January. That's it for now for ArcfieldWeather.com. I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.